Hello, so coming to another, what is this now, the fourth video in which I'm reflecting on the subject of transformation. And this is prompted by a couple of questions in the gender and sexuality survey that I've referred to before, the link for which is in the description for this video. And looking at the magic, as it were, and the urgency that many of us in the cross-streaming or trans community have, either to transform or perhaps to see others transformed. In this little video today, I think this is the fourth now of what I plan as 5 videos on this subject. I wanted very quickly to reflect on a post in the Cross-Stream Life forum, which I've mentioned a number of times before. Wonderful, wonderful forum covering a very wide range of topics related to the nature of not just the nature. I mean, there's a lighter side as well, but sort of for those of us that do like to explore this whole question of what is it about being trans, what are the potential causes, experiences, and so on. So a link to that particular thread, this particular thread in that forum, and from there you can very easily find other parts of the forum as relevant. This was a post actually some time ago now, which I only came across recently when I was browsing the forum. It's by Parody. Apologies if I pronounced your name wrong there, Parody, which kind of does relate more generally to the whole question of transformation. And she offered a suggested classification. This was an article that she'd written on another website or web forum around ideas of transformation, particularly focusing on 5 separate categories. What she calls the transformee. This is someone that gains pleasure from being the subject of being changed or fantasizing about that. So this may be someone else deciding, being in control, as it were, what is to be done. And from that, you can see that the transformee is essentially playing a submissive role. Secondly, the shapeshifter, gaining pleasure from changing your form. But your own will here is what guides the transformation. Could involve a gender switch version of your old self or a copy of an existing person or totally new person. What she calls the shaper. This is where you gain pleasure of molding another person to whatever form you want. So you're the one in control here, using transformation as a form of domination and control. The interested observer, fascinated by the idea that someone transforms their gender and appearance, and possibly more. For example, someone might become a perfect copy of a person in your life. The idea that this transformation exists excites you, but you are not necessarily dominating the transformee or shapeshifter, she says. And finally, the model, turned on by the idea or reality, actuality of another person becoming a perfect copy of you. Maybe you would enjoy having a perfect twin that you didn't have, or the idea that someone wants to be just like you is flattering. So it may well be that there are other aspects of transformation that feature in sexual fantasies. I cannot relate to many of these, although I know that, of course, many people will do. And typically, I imagine they're going to one of these roles, as it were, or one of these perspectives is going to be the primary lens for their, if that's the right word, for their fantasy, or at least may feature regularly. And I suspect that finding the answer to what prompts that probably would take us back to another survey, which I have mentioned before, which is looking at the hierarchy of needs. Again, I'll put a link to that particular book, Jack Moran, if I remember offhand. I don't have the note to hand at the moment. but I also put a little post on that on the CrossStream Life forum, and a little video here on this channel. So links again in the description box. But there, the idea is that there is something fundamental, some underlying need that sits behind our fantasy, our core fantasy. And that may well have been something that formed really quite early on in life. I suspect that's going to be the case with what drives each of these. Because I don't have experience of each of these, I can't really comment. I suppose one that does interest me is the idea of the shape shifter. Again, not something that stimulates me, has ever really been something I've wanted to do. I guess if there was this ability to do it, I might try it. Sure, I would, because I like trying all sorts of things. I like trying being a bird, for example, that could soar very high and have that kind of freedom, provided I could be in control and not become prey, I guess, to other animals or the elements, and could shapeshift back at whim. What I think is interesting with the shape-shifting transformation perhaps goes beyond a sexual motivation. I think Jack Malay, maybe others as well, commented on this in the forum for Paradise Post, is the idea that perhaps we are tapping into a spiritual or ethereal nature. So the shaman of many different indigenous populations shapeshift. They take on the form of, might be another gender, might be another human being, but very often it will be an animal spirit that they are kind of calling upon, connecting with. So there's something there that is taking them into another domain, another realm of consciousness, perhaps. So that may well be a factor, and that certainly, as someone that does have an interest in spirituality, is something that I would have an interest in. I have actually, on a number of occasions, attended so-called journey meditations led by people who are very well versed in, for example, indigenous American traditions, where the meditation has guided you towards connecting or meeting an animal spirit. It's not exactly yourself shape-shifting, but finding a guide. It's only once or twice when I've done that when I've actually really had a sense that I did that I actually met the guide. But I think that was enough to give me an insight that there is this ability perhaps to connect and to transcend your normal nature. It perhaps takes us into the realm of talking about archetypes as well, those sort of collective, universal imprints or patterns that are there for us to tap into. So shapeshifter, I think, is an interesting one. The transformee, I get pleasure from being the subject or being changed. Yes, absolutely. Although I am not, as I've said in previous videos, myself into the likes of femdom. And usually I like to be in control when I am being transformed, but sort of being, as it were, the one standing in this magical transformation machine that we see in the likes of Your Face Familiar, or if a magician could wave a wand, absolutely, I would like to be there. And perhaps, particularly in my earlier life, some of my fantasies took me to the place where there were scenarios where it might have been in a school play or something, that I would be the one being transformed. Usually, though, it's within my control. It doesn't necessarily or invariably involve another person. The idea of being a shaper, gaining pleasure of molding another person to whatever form you want, be that as a form of domination and control, as Paradis suggests, or for some other reason. It might just be to satisfy a curiosity. I don't think I personally have much that I can relate to here. Among the models, as it were, who can stimulate me, and these again may include actors playing a feminine role, for example. Yes, I guess that there would be examples where you would say, well, when that's known in a particular film or on a program like Your Face, that sounds familiar, where yes, there's an interest in seeing the effects of a transformation and kind of enjoying seeing that result and being able to perhaps project onto it, project onto the model, I should say. Does that come down to actually wanting to mold or change or transform other people? Do I go around looking at guys, for example, think, oh, I wonder what they would look like if they were to undergo this transformation? I don't think so in general, but again, I can understand that others may do that. They may have that interest, that intrigue. And whilst that might seem very perverse for a lot of people, I think when you start to dig behind this, well, what is the motivation? What is the, is there something beyond a purely sexual motivation? Is this erotic need tied to what Maslow would call a need for actualizing, or satisfying some deep-rooted need that we have? And when you've developed that idea and looking for opportunities, it's possible to see why people would go down that road, why they would find that of interest. The model, the idea of actually being another person or becoming, or someone else becoming a perfect copy of you. I've never thought of anybody else becoming a perfect copy of me. God bless them if they did. Heavens. I think I can understand this as the idea of it sort of comes into perhaps celebrity wannabe types, the pop idols, my own sometimes playing out, trying to recreate the style of different pop singers and actresses and so on in the style of Your Face Sounds Familiar, which I've featured in my Transformation Tuesday videos quite a lot. That is more about playing and tapping into a style and trying to recreate an image. So there is something stimulating in that I can't quite get to the bottom of. It's the playful side of my fem nature rather than the authentic expression. But yes, I imagine this is really quite a big thing. If we start to think of people who are attracted to celebrities and want to be like them and model them and other role models, I guess this is really just a development of that. Not necessarily actually wanting to be that person, but potentially to have their attributes, be that physical or otherwise, and to model what is recognized as an attractive or desirable style. So, as I say, I'm not myself driven by most of these categories here. It tends to be just one. But it comes back to the question about transformation for me being fundamentally an interest in male to female. And as I've said in previous videos, I've actually narrowed down some criteria for, as it were, suitable models that tend to act as stimulants for me. Very much about being able to see the possibility to transform, not just to create a look, but to present sexually. So because this is the form of transformation that interests me, I do come back to Felix's theory about us having, Felix Conrad, a gender core, which I've spoken about in particularly the first video in this series, and his idea that essentially we have a brain sex that tells us how to present, how to behave, that may be incongruent with our physical biology. And as I've really begun to appreciate through these reflections, for me, typically comes alive when I am sexually aware, when I want to express myself, my sexuality. It's not there a lot of the time otherwise. So something very specific about male to female transformation. I'm not interested in female to male transformation, for example. I'm not personally stimulated by body shaping, by body swapping, by shape shifting, and most other forms of transformation, with the exception perhaps of those that touch on something of a mystical or spiritual nature. So here I might actually say that, yeah, I guess in the past I had an interest in some of the Greek stories. So there was the story of Heracles or Hercules, not transforming into a woman, but being dressed by a woman by the queen Omphale when he was a slave. And there were various other Greek myths, not to mention myths from other traditions, that touch on this. And as always with the myths, they are perhaps speaking to something deep within, something mystical. And I think possibly that area of mystery, of illusion, is something that has appealed to me as well. This idea that magic can happen, albeit if it is in a make-believe fantasy world. The fact that actors, your face, and so on, and I would hope perhaps some of my own creations and the creations of other cross streamers show that we can, with a little bit of work and whatever it is, makeup and face straps or whatever, and wigs, we can actually create this illusion. Sort of plays to this idea of being able to transform. Coming back to Felix's idea again, that when we are children, perhaps we associate dress very strongly with sex, and therefore the idea of appearing externally as a female just by putting on a dress and styling and so on is itself enough to feel that we have transformed, and we can be hopefully acknowledged in our new guise, in our new role by others. So yes, I think this allusion to magic touches on something interesting that goes beyond just sexuality, expressing sexuality. There's potentially something spiritual or ethereal there. And illusion, genuine female illusion, does actually intrigue me. It's not something I look at a lot these days or have a great interest in, but I know when I was quite young, here in the UK, there was a very well-known female illusionist called Danny LaRue, and I'm sure there were others at that time, who created this amazing illusion. Some of the vintage female impersonators were very much focused on illusion rather than over-the-top drag. So again, they seem to play with this idea of this magic. Now, seemingly some of these vintage female impersonators, some going back really to the turn of the 20th century, the sort of early decades of the 20th century, seemingly saw it as a job, as an art form, and they weren't allegedly practicing cross-dressers or had any other interest in cross-dressing or would regard themselves as trans, according to their statements, their histories, otherwise. So they put a lot of time and attention into creating illusion. That was really what the audiences wanted to see in those days, and some achieved great fame through doing that. So a few rambling thoughts there on this interesting topic. It's very helpful, I think, that we have this classification offered by Parody. Got me thinking and got me thinking particularly about why my own interest is very much related to male to female transformation. And being the transformee, normally with or without, normally without any submissiveness necessarily, or indeed a need to role play with anybody else being involved, but also the interest in models, seeing models who play this role as well. I will be coming back with what I think for now will be my final reflection video on this transformation topic for a while, although it's actually triggered a few other kind of related subjects that I think I will be picking up on very soon as well. Before I go, though, just for fun, here, once again, I've allowed myself to be, shall we say, the victim, not the victim, the subject of the magician's wand. Just